20 years my day up on the film scene. Can you move my passion, my dream? Yeah, ride me on a mission bright. Me tell them stories about life and the fight. We start from scratch with just one lens. Hustling hard from make some ends. From the slums to the hills, my craft my art. Every frame I tell a piece of my heart. My journey long, but my heart strong. Every scene a memory where me belong. Lighting up the screen with my history. Me tell them all about my filmmaking journey. And when I follow script, me write my own. Although I sing in my empire grown. From the dusty roads to the urban glow. My legacy built, my talent show. We film the struggles, we film the love. We capture the beauty from sky above. 20 years I'm still going strong. Filmmaker at art, my personal love. My journey long, but my heart strong. Every scene a memory where me belong. Lighting up the screen with my history. Me tell them all about my filmmaking journey. Miaka 20 kwenye safari, hadithi za Kenya zikiwa halisi. Kamera mkononi nikiwa kiongozi, filamu zikiangaza kama nyota. Mitaa ya Nairobi hadi Mombasa, kila kona na hekaya ya kipekee. Nikikamata
So now,
movies we make world tremble. 20 years I journey through my soul on fire. Capturing the moments make me after real inspire. From film reels to teaching me never retire.
So now, guys, so now, this is, I think, my third live stream. I'm trying to make this like a Friday thing. Acha niangalie hii maneno yangu yote kama iko sawa, kama kila mtu anaona stream. Kabisa. Now, this past week, I think since US President Donald Trump cancelled USAID or USAID. Yeah, ikwangi USAID. Because it's meant to make you think it's for aid. Anyway, there is a lot to unpack. And I looked around and I think this gentleman here, Mike Benz, he was on the Joe Rogan podcast 2 months ago. And he actually broke it down quite well. So we are going to watch a bit of this and a bit of that just to show you exactly what this organization has been doing worldwide and just how little we know about exactly what they've been doing. So tutaangalia hapa kwanza Joe Rogan and then we move on to others. There's many others. Kuna hiyo is the same guy, but he is the guy who's been really done this research properly. I've watched, counter-checked what he's been saying, and I think he's as close to the truth as we shall come. So without further ado,
They tried to do that for a while. That was
let's start it properly.
But I mean, right away, I was thinking, okay, this makes a lot of sense when you're explaining like the Ministry of Truth or whatever it is. Is that what it's called? Ministry of Truth?
Well,
they tried to do that for a while. That was, I think. So, just as a background, please tell people what you do and what positions you held.
Yeah. I do all things internet censorship. That's really my mission in life, my North Star. I started off as a corporate lawyer and then worked for the Trump White House. I was a speechwriter. I sort of advised.
So that's the first, I believe that's the first time, 2016, that Trump was president. I think that's when he was in.
Technology issues, and then I ran the cyber division for the State Department, basically the big tech portfolio that interfaces between sort of big government, international diplomacy issues on technology, and then the sort of private sector, U.S. national champions in the tech space like Google and Facebook. So I was the guy that the lobbyists would call when they wanted favors from big government. But, you know, my life took a huge sort of U-turn, you might say, when the 2016 election came around and I became obsessed with the early development of the censorship industry. You know, this.
So just so that we are clear, a lot of this actually was stepped up. It had started long before, but because they were having whatever you're going to hear, they were having their way for so long, they were fine with it until the orange man won. Then they stepped it up, and I believe that's when really most of us started feeling the censorship and all these things. But why?
Giant behemoth of government, private sector, civil society organizations, and media all collabing to censor the
You've heard that the government. Let's repeat that.
censorship industry. This giant behemoth of government, private sector, civil society organizations, and
Yeah, so the government, the private sector, your Safaricoms, your whatnot, and civil society, NGOs, activists, all that. So all these entities that you look up to so much, all of them were captured by USAID. How?
media all collabing to censor the internet. It was kind of a weird path from there.
When did it all start rolling? When did the government realize that they had to get actively involved in censorship, and what steps did they initially take to get involved in this?
Skiza.
It started in 2014 with the Ukraine fiasco, the coup, and then the counter.
Yeah, so many people don't actually know that prior to all this melee, can I call it a melee? Prior to the violence in Ukraine at the moment, the US had already, they've been doing this, regime changes for a very long time. So they had gone to Ukraine, and there was what was his name? I can't remember, but I guess he's going to talk about it. But that's really, a lot of people don't understand how this war came to be, but this is part of the ingredients that brought that to be.
The coup was great for internet free speech. I mean, you really do need to start the story of internet censorship with the story of internet freedom, because promotion of censorship is sort of the flip side of promotion of free speech. And we've had this free speech government diplomatic role for 80 years now. When World War II ended,
8 years.
we embarked with the international rules-based order that was created in 1948. We had the UN, we had NATO, we had the IMF, the World Bank. We had this big global system now. There was a prohibition in 1948 under the UN Declaration of Human Rights that you can't acquire territory by military force anymore.
But all these things is saying you can counter-check. This is what I have realized is that in as much as a lot of information is on the internet, a lot of it is also bullshit. So you have to be careful and check. And the reason I'm actually going through what he was saying is because I watched it and checked, and the main points, not everything of course, but the main points that make the story coherent, I checked. And yeah, he's right up
to here. Respected by international law, so everything.
But
had
you
to
need
move
to
to
do
soft
your own
power
research.
Influence, and so the U.S. government took a very
you
by
had
international law. You can't acquire territory by military force anymore and have it be respected by international law. So everything had to move to soft power influence, and so the U.S. government took a very active role beginning in 1948 to promote free speech around the world, and this was done through all these. Initially CIA proprietaries like Voice of America and Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty.
So, what you see when he says CIA preparatory organizations, like now, the CIA actually started commandeering a lot of the, the front-facing institutions, media and whatnot that actually communicate with the people. So, the radio stations, TV stations, movies, whatnot, they actually inserted a lot of the propaganda in all those media, if you like. So that is what most people don't actually get, that a lot of some of these things happen. Like I was hearing what you're saying, it really broke my heart. I almost lost hope. They're everywhere.
And then the whole Wisner's, Wurlitzer, State Department, CIA apparatus, all the early partnerships with the media and the war machine around propaganda for World War II continued through the Cold War. And then that hit the gas with promotion of free speech on the internet when the internet was privatized. It was initially a military project, so it was a government operation from Jump Street. And then in 1991, the World Wide Web came out, civilian use. And right away, the State Department, the military, our intelligence sphere was promoting free speech so that we could have a basically government pressure on foreign countries to open up their internet, to allow basically groups that the U.S. government was supporting to be able to combat state control over media in those other countries.
You've heard that. So since, of course, the U.S. has been militaristic since then. They've invaded countries, whatnot. But for majority of the way they engaged was through this soft power, what they call soft power. So to put pressure using media, civil society, and whatnot on governments. So most of the time we used to think that was a good thing, but we used to hear all the civil society is crying about this thing has happened, this corruption. What we were not aware that it was the same beast. But
so we already had this sort of deep interplay between government, tech companies, universities, NGOs that dates back 80 years. You look at the evolution of NGOs.
Think about that. 80 years, head start. They'd already started planning, slowly putting things in place. This is the thing I always tell people. A lot of organizations, a lot of companies, a lot of countries, they think decades ahead, but I don't find that to be something that we are good at. You are told, millennial goals, or Project 2030, Project 2050 will do this. So as we are told, we popularize it, then we wait to see what they are supposed to do. They tell you, we have to do climate change things, we have to do diversity things, and we need this many people in this type in this place by this time, That was, a lot of these things, they used to sound so clever when we were growing up in the media, because we didn't know anything. We were not exposed at all to anything other than the mainstream media and the propaganda they were feeding us.
It was like Freedom House or the Atlantic Council or Wilson Center and promoting these free speech things. So, but what happened is in 2014, we had about 25 years of successful free speech diplomacy. And then there was we tried to overthrow the government of Ukraine. We successfully did. And I'm not even arguing whether that's a good or a bad thing. But the fact is the U.S. did effectively January 6th, the Yanukovych government out of power.
Yeah, Yanukovych. If you remember, I remember when Zelensky was coming in, that kind of they fronted him to people like this comedian, just carefree, whatnot, and what. Then at the same time, they're pulling a coup behind that. So what we are seeing is Zelensky and his quirkiness and whatnot. But what is going on at the back of that is an actual coup.
2014. I mean, we literally had our Assistant Secretary of State for Europe and Eurasian Affairs, Victoria Nuland, handing out cookies and water bottles to violent street protesters as they surrounded the Parliament building and ran the democratically elected government out of office. But then what happened is...
And you see, this was a democratically elected government, but now U.S. was pressuring through the civil society, media, and whatnot for the person they wanted to come in. So you see the protests. In fact, you can see them in the U.S. right now all over the many states that are not happy Donald Trump won legitimately. Thrash them. But, now they're starting that upheaval and creating straw men all over the place. Oh, he's doing this. He's not really doing that, but they just throw the narrative. Because I know most people, they'll hear it on the media, but they won't even counter check. So they use that, our inability or unwillingness to counter check what they're saying to push the lies.
The eastern side of the state completely broke away. So we don't respect this new U.S. installed government. Crimea voted in a referendum to join the Russian Federation. And that kicked off, that sort of set in motion the events that would end.
Most people who are pro-Ukraine, they don't even know this. They just know right now media has told us this is what you're supposed to do. Then they follow.
The concept of free speech diplomacy is like a U.S. government unfettered good, because what they argued is we pumped $5 billion worth of U.S. government money into media institutions in Ukraine. That's the
$5 billion into Ukraine media engagement, and that of course includes the activists and what. But $5 billion. That's what. Just imagine if they pumped 500, let's say $600 billion into just media, Kenya media. Just think of how much influence. Right now they get 3-4 billion, that's what they were getting from USAID. But now imagine that magnitude. That's what they put into Ukraine. They actually Anyway, let me
the
not
figure that's cited by Victoria
preempt.
Nuland in December 2013, right before the coup. $5 billion setting up independent media companies, basically sponsoring Mockingbird style our media assets in the region, and they still didn't penetrate eastern Ukraine.
Think about that. After you've done all that to influence people, you set up media, the propaganda is non-stop. Russia bad, what, Donbass. I think the region they call Donbass also, is pro-Russia. So people are even being told, hey, this story, when I was hearing it in my head, I was like, it makes so much sense. That's why all this thing is falling apart. And that's why the media goes spastic about Ukraine in such a weird way. That it's like, okay, there are over 1 million people that have died. Like, Ukraine is decimated. The population of the young men is basically gone. Like, what are people chasing exactly?
The eastern Ukraine.
Oh, you hear about, we want to save the democracy. That democracy US has been selling nothing.
Primarily ethnic Russian. Didn't penetrate Crimea, so they said we need something to stop them from being able to combat our media influence. And they initially called this the Gerasimov Doctrine, named after Valery Gerasimov, who was this Russian general. They took a quote from him saying, "The new nature of war is no longer about military to military conflict. All we need to do is take over the media in these NATO countries, and that's primarily social media, get one of our pawns elected as the president, and that president will control the military." So it's much cheaper and more efficient to win a military war by simply winning civilian elections. So that was.
Does that make sense to you now? You come in, you invest billions, set up the media apparatus, NGOs, activists, whatnot, and then start to influence and protests and whatnot. And actually in the government, you've paid also MPs and all these people in there. So the main thing actually right now, because they had to stop, because everybody, information is flowing freely on the internet, they had to also curtail. That's why you hear all this fact checking, you hear you've said a bad word, so we are banning you for a day, for a month, for what. That's when all that, that's all that is not to protect people from harassment, or is it called cyberbullying? It has nothing to do with that. Because actually, I've never understood cyberbullying. You can't bully me on the internet. I'll just switch you off. That makes sense. But they took the responsibility not because they care about you. It's because it was for their own nefarious reasons.
It's called the Gerasimov Doctrine. That's what set up the early censorship infrastructure in 2014. 3 years later, the guy who coined that, Mark Galeotti, would write a sort of mea culpa saying, oops, I'm sorry. Gerasimov was actually citing what the U.S. does. But by that point, they'd already renamed it hybrid warfare. NATO formally declared its tanks to tweets doctrine, saying that the new role of NATO is no longer just about tanks, it's about controlling tweets. And then Brexit happened in June 2016. In July 2016, the very next month in Warsaw, NATO added hybrid warfare to its formal charter, basically authorizing the military, the diplomatic sphere, and the intelligence world to take control over social media. And then 5 months later, Trump won the election, being called a Russian asset. So all that.
I'd like you guys to follow it. By the way, just there's some noise in the background. It's Friday, people. But I want you to just think about it for a second. So despite the guardrails they had put, all these things, they didn't want to happen or happening because the internet is free. Donald Trump can directly go with his message to the people, or all these other, the so-called extreme right wing. They're just conservatives. It's extreme. It's a branding thing. So when you say extreme right, you're like, oh my God, the racists. That's what they do because your mind is programmed that way. So that is exactly what happened here. And then you see that when the Orange Man came in, you're about to see the ramping up
that
of those
infrastructure was
efforts.
redirected home to the U.S.
Jesus.
Yes, now from like doing it in Ukraine, Kenya, all this Brazil, Argentina, from now outside, they brought it back home now to America. By home, I mean their home, not Kenya, not mine.
It was looking pretty bleak, I would say, in terms of the direction internet censorship was headed. It seemed like the censorship machine was winning. up until
Yep.
around the time that Elon purchased X.
I cannot be grateful to that billionaire enough. I know a lot of people are going, oh, and you see, this is not a worship thing with Elon. I admire the man greatly. The things he's been able to do, just dream about even one of them and see where your mind gets to. And on top of that, while it's an investment, it was also, he stuck his neck out and said, hey, over here, if we go this way, there's no free flow of information, even my business will suffer. So while he's doing it, for the general population to have freer speech, is also looking at how they are already clamping down on the businesses he's doing. So in one way or another, if you are powerful like that, you can make such decisions and spend some money. All right? That's why I'm on X now, Alboa Cinema over there, blue tick. Yes, tunalipanga your monthly. We have to support, but because I've never actually had issues on X, and I always have the most views, the most engagement on X. They don't really throttle me, and I find that to be extreme. Like of late, I've been testing Facebook. They've gotten much better after Zuckerberg's announcement, but it still has some censorship, shadow banning, and whatnot. YouTube it's the biggest. I think for live streaming it's the best, but they're still extremely censorious, and they have a lot of these words they've placed everywhere you can't say. So it's like, you understand that we need the platform, but it's not good.
That seems to me to be our fork in the road. That's the alternative timeline. Mark Andreessen talked about that yesterday, that we've had a couple of alternative timelines where things have shifted. I think that was one of the big ones.
No, that's exactly it. I mean, he's sort of the timeline where we miss the bullet, is where there's a Deus ex machina. It's sort of like a Deus ex machina, where it's this random plot thing that happens. Someone descends onto the stage and solves all the plot's loopholes and magically saves the plucky heroes that were otherwise in danger. There were events in the run-up. Well, it all sort of happened simultaneously, really, because the month that Elon announced his acquisition was the same month that the Disinformation Governance Board was announced at DHS.
Now, there was that, I remember when it came out, there was that placed this weird organization. They're saying that they have to check. They're calling it misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. They just come up with these terms. So everybody, they're being told in the media, everybody, that's malinformation. Most people have that knee-jerk reaction. New word, let's use it.
Which was the first thing that really roused Republicans, and frankly anyone with institutional power in D.C., to finally stare into the sun and recognize, or at least begin to glimpse, the size of what they were up against. The Disinformation Governance Board set off a flurry of congressional activity from Chuck Grassley and other luminaries in Congress. There were a lot of...
Just remember, when you hear words like the Disinformation Committee or Board or what, just know it's censorship. It has nothing to do with looking for the truth, because these are the same people that are feeding you lies every day. So it's not the truth. It is what type of information do they want it to filter to the population, and what do they want to keep from you. So when you hear those words, don't immediately assume, this thing is for... No, it's not for you. It is not to help you and get the right information or the correct information. No, it is what they want you to know. In fact, a lot of the times they just plant lies. So you have to be alert. This is a misinformation, disinformation masterclass.
There's whistleblower documents came out, and for years, the entire Republican Party and most of the Democrat Party had denied the existence of government censorship, and it, frankly, the Ministry of Truth was not the Disinformation Governance Board. The Ministry of Truth had already existed 3 years earlier at DHS. They just called it a name that masked what it did. It was called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is a name that puts you half to sleep by the time you're finished saying it.
Ministry of Truth scared the shit out of people just because of the Orwellian context of the term. You know, it just
Yeah,
seems
if you've read Animal Farm, you remember there's the Ministry of Truth in there. The government now is the one that is in charge of the truth. What the government says is the truth, but it's not. Most of the time government doesn't say the truth. But yeah, just for reference, for those who haven't read Animal Farm, Enda Usome, 1984.
what do you what?
Well, the funny thing is they were right. The Disinformation Governance Board was not the Ministry of Truth. It was a dull, boring, mundane, bureaucratic layer to manage the Ministry of Truth that was already created 3 years earlier. But the fact is,
You
nobody
can't
called
really
them
know.
out on it because of
If
the
you're a
thick
normal
language
person,
of
would you
censor
know that?
speak that hides this whole thing from general public awareness. I mean, in my own path, I've tried to self-reflect about how I ended up here, spending my life on this, and I used to think it was primarily about chess and my sort of early encounters with AI, and then seeing the censorship AI that really sparked my pursuit into this. But the more I've thought about it, the more it's based. I think it's just kind of coming from a corporate law background where your job is to plant dirty tricks in the fine print of 150-page legal documents and to catch dirty tricks in that linguistic framing that's done by opposing lawyers. And that's really how they pulled this off. Nobody thought in 2019 that the cybersecurity agency in DHS would be the Ministry of Truth. They didn't appreciate the layers of censorspeak that were constructed on top of that to say that, well, DHS governs critical infrastructure, and elections are critical infrastructure. Public health is critical infrastructure. Misinformation online is a cyber component. So it's a cyber attack on critical infrastructure. And so
You see how they turn it into a crime to justify what they're about to do. They layer it with definitions and twisting words and whatnot. This is basically because a lot of us really, while we seem to be aware that there's a lot of malfeasance and lies from governments and all these politicians and NGOs, and while we are casually aware of it, we don't know how they do it, because a lot of these lies, for example, if you are going to talk about it, they used to talk about equality, then they changed the word to equity. But most people just started using it thinking it's the same. It's not the same, because equality means it's in reference to having equal opportunity. But equity means having equal outcomes. There's something extremely wrong with that. So you must be aware with this semantic game that is played, and it's also because they own the infrastructure of media. They push it so hard that so many people, by the time it's like become part of their vocabulary, part of their thinking process,
Normally policymakers or people in the public think, oh, cybersecurity, that's hacking, that's phishing, that's for CIA,
Phishing,
NSA people to stop
Aye.
Russians from hacking us. And they think critical infrastructure, they think things like dams or subsea cables or low Earth satellites. They don't think it means you sitting on the toilet at 9:30 p.m. on a Thursday saying, I don't know that I love mail-in ballots, and then suddenly you're being flagged by DHS as a cyber threat actor for attacking the U.S. critical infrastructure of confidence in our elections.
You heard that. Like they set it up, so even if you're online, you say, I don't trust this process, you are flagged as somebody who's injurious to the infrastructure. That if it's elections or it's health or what, that's what happened during COVID coming up.
But that's how they scaled these definitions into this giant mission creep,
Yeah,
and
it's
now it's
just
metastasized into the
a
entire
semantics
U.S.
game.
federal government. The Pentagon,
It's actually, the thing is this thing is the whole government, the biggest companies, the biggest NGOs, and then now all over the world repeat different levels, but it's the same setup everywhere. Kenya here, we have the same, if you think about it. Like when we were having the referendum for our last this current constitution, you remember there was civil service, they have to be inside. You know who was funding civil service to put or to argue for their points in the constitution?
State Department, USAID, the National Endowment for Democracy, DHS, FBI, DOJ, HHS, and the task in front of this administration is just unbelievably enormous in deconstructing that.
Is it possible?
They're going to run into a lot of
Like basically, they've basically entrenched themselves in every single aspect of government, every department, everything. They've embedded the ideology. And you see, the ideology is used as part of to enable this, the censorships and the what and the power plays. So it is everywhere. So in his opinion, it's going to be, I don't know if he says it's impossible or it's going to be very difficult to uproot it all. Like, for example, now Trump is saying he's draining the swamp. That is the swamp. It's just that you don't know how deep the swamp is. So you get in there like, you go deeper, there's still more and more. So I guess that's what he's meaning. I don't like the notion that it's hopeless, because I've just seen in the last week or so the way things are just falling apart with USAID all over the world. It's not impossible. Of course, you leave some remnants, but they'll be too weak and scared to try and pull it off.
headwinds, because once this power was discovered and funded to the tune of billions, as it has been,
I think
we have this foreign policy
hundreds of
establishment that
billions.
manages the American empire that saw internet censorship as kind of an El Dorado key to permanently winning the soft power influence game around the world. And what I mean by that is, okay, so you know how a lot of people talk about the early CIA activity in the media with things like Operation Mockingbird and whatnot, and the ability to sort of
So I'm not able to
propagandize
check
things in the
charts
media.
for
Well,
the moment. I
you
don't know if
never had
even
this
people are
capacity in
watching.
the
I'm just
1950s
going
while that was
blind for
going
now.
on.
To tell you.
If you and I were at dinner, Thanksgiving or something, and there's 12 people at the table, and
It's
I start
So,
talking to you about, I don't know, the COVID vaccines may have adverse side effects. There was never an ability to simply reach under the table as an intelligence agency or as the Department of Homeland Security or as the Pentagon or the State Department and just turn off the volume when we talk to each other peer to peer. But since
Now our phones.
the lion's share of all communication is digital, especially the politically impactful ones, that capacity now allows our blob, our foreign policy establishment, to effectively control every election, or at least tilt every election around the world. And they've sprawled this into 140 countries. And Trump is going to run into every single regional desk at the State Department.
So just remember, this is 2 months ago. So currently, it seems easier to dismantle than I think he thought. That's my assessment. I don't know just the extent yet, but I want to give it a month or so to see exactly whether all these NGOs still have that pool. You can see all their rubbish on media still. That a month or two should give a good indication of how fight has gone.
Single equity at the Pentagon arguing that if you do not allow us to continue this censorship work, it will undermine national security because it will allow Russian favored narratives to win the day in the Ivory Coast, in Chad, in Niger, and Brazil, and Venezuela, and Central and Eastern Europe. You're going to.
So that is the power play. That is the lie that is told so that people are on edge. Oh, Russia disinformation. Hey, we need this. That's the panic. They're always trying to put people in a panic so that you can coalesce to what they want. That
to
is
have
the general
State Department argue that if we
strategy.
don't have this counter misinformation capacity, then extremists will win elections around the world, or populists will win the election around the world, and that will undermine.
And the thing is they're the ones who label something extremist. So they'd come, even if you just they say, oh, you're an extreme right winger or extreme. They rarely say left winger because they're woke, leftists. So they always say extreme this or what this or the extreme what. So they use that term a lot to try and scare people into to submit, basically. Okay, we'll take care of you, don't worry. This bad misinformation from Russia, you shouldn't hear it. Don't hear what Russia is saying.
In the power of our democratic institutions, essentially our programming, our assets in the region, and they've built this enormous capacity. We use it because it works, because it wins.
Yeah.
And the fact is Trump probably only won this election because for the same reason he probably only won the 2016 election, which was, in both cases, there was largely a free internet. It was when Trump got censored into oblivion in 2020 by the U.S. government under his nose, working with webs of outside NGOs and Pentagon front groups to mass censor virtually every narrative that he was putting out. That
you remember, he was kicked off Twitter at the time, Facebook, Instagram. Basically, like the president of America was kicked off. I think they were just flexing to show, what you see, what we can do. So where he mentions NGO, if you don't know, like for example, when Facebook was hiring its fact checkers, they worked with organizations, you see, and those organizations, they receive money from USAID there and Facebook, that's how they do. Then those organizations, because they are ideologically inclined towards the left, for example, they are the ones now who censor. That's why you realize there are so many words that normal words are being censored. You say it, you're throttled and whatnot. So that is part of that process.
That he lost. So it does work to win elections.
Yeah, so they cancelled him on all social media, couldn't communicate, started truth. He could, although I have to be honest with you, because a lot of this, also they made it almost a crime to say, like, oh, that election was fishy. That US 2020 election reminded me of our elections over here. Oh, my God. It was so... Like, there were so many weird things going on, but because now they say, no, you can't say, can you accept that? Trump has never, he said, no. I think he's, in this time, he'll try and find out exactly what happened. And I'm just going to go on a limb and say, I don't know if we'll ever know, but I know that there were a lot of fake votes in that election, which in fact, because I'm looking at Biden, they're saying he was more popular than Obama. How? And even he got like some 10 million votes over something that were never in this last election. Then they're trying to explain it away, or people didn't come or what, but see, you know how it's done. It's just that the Americans always, the Europeans always think that things are so safe. That's like, it's so easy to steal elections. Right now, like in states like California, whatnot, you don't need to show your ID. In fact, if you ask somebody for your ID, for their ID, it's like you can be taken to court, man. So what does that say? Like if somebody is coming to vote, you've let in millions of people as immigrants illegally, and then you say that you shouldn't ask for an ID. I mean.
And every...
Hiyo ndio kitu your Kasongo wants to do here, by the way. Just go around. It's happening. It's happening right now. He's even saying it because he's a bit of a dundum. I mean, I can't believe you guys voted for this guy.
There's a regional desk at the State Department covering every country on Earth. Victoria Nuland, had a desk that covered about 20 countries.
Every country.
So every country, the State Department is a preferred winner of that election. We work with all political parties. And...
like, for example, you remember when our president went to America, sat there on the Oval Office there on the president's seat, and then Biden was standing right there. What do you think that was? The deal ilikuwa imeiva. The deal had been done. So they'll play with anyone. That's why they've installed so many horrible leaders in this continent, especially. Not just here, like South America, everywhere. But like, you look at all these coups and all those coups they are paid for by USAID and the CIA in general. But you can see, like the people they put for us are people who are corrupt enough to do what they want without even thinking. Just give them money, it's done. It doesn't matter what will happen to the citizens. It doesn't matter. That's why you have to be really careful about a lot of these decisions you made. Like when you decide to go and scream Hustler Nation and you vote for this guy, and we are telling you, Bana, jamaa iko. Of all those people, he was at the very bottom, and somehow you guys raised him to the top. You didn't realize the kind of who is actually, which team he's playing for. Right now, it's obvious to me that our president is an American drone. He's a pawn for the Americans. And that's why I think he's been allowed to do so many weird things around, but just doing just injuring the population in every single way. Economically, kila kitu, hospital, nothing works because who cares, man? The money is being sent.
That's a hugely powerful tool to lose. It's just twisted and evil, and it needs to. And we need to win I don't want to say fair fights, but dipping into this sort of dark sorcery power has not only does it crush the First Amendment entirely, but the diplomatic blowback is just absolutely enormous. I can go through examples of that if you're interested.
Sure.
Well,
Very
so
interesting.
we have this thing called the Global Engagement Center at the State Department. It was set up initially to fight ISIS.
This is the use.
Because in 2014, 2015, when the Obama administration was trying to put military boots on the ground in Syria, there was this sort of giant threat that was publicly talked about all over about ISIS recruiting on Facebook and Twitter. Homegrown ISIS threats, for example.
Do you guys remember those stories? Oh, they call it local terrorist threats. Even here, we had the same narrative. You remember when we had some explosions and the attacks. You remember? What I believe is that they actually cause those attacks so that they can escalate the issue. When you guys are not like, oh, you don't think it's serious, have something. Then all of a sudden, all of you are compliant. Hey, save us! The army, GSU, where are you?
Arlen, Texas fiasco where there was a shooting by a ISIS terrorist and the web of online intrigues around that. 3 years later, it would come out that he had been effectively groomed by the FBI. The FBI had paid someone over $100,000 to become his best friend and text him to tear up Texas before that. But never mind, the horse was out of the barn.
Like they play that long game. They used to actually radicalize. Like the CIA, FBI would go and radicalize people. They do psychological assessments of the person. They collect your online data. They know this person is very close. We just need to give him a little push. Then he can do what we want. Even if you look at the people that attempted to assassinate Trump these last campaigns, most of them, they just disappear. They had an online presence. You can't find it. They just you see them there. They're on all these different CIA trainings and whatnot. Then they just disappear. Then they just keep quiet. Have you ever guys had an assassination attempt on an influential person, and then the media just keeps quiet? It goes on for 2-3 days, then they just keep quiet. Nobody's saying anything about those. I know most of you have forgotten about it, but that is part of it.
This idea that ISIS was recruiting on Facebook and Twitter gave a license to the State Department to create this thing called the Global Engagement Center, which was really the first official censorship capacity in the U.S. government. It predated the DHS stuff that would come along in the Trump era, and this gave the State Department the direct back channel, the direct coordinating capacity with all the social media companies to tell them about ISIS accounts, ISIS narratives that were trending. The Pentagon poured hundreds of millions of dollars into developing a technique called natural language processing, which is a way to use AI to scan the entire internet for keywords. And you would have these
Listen to this.
academic researchers effectively constructing code books of language. What do ISIS advocates or supporters talk like? What words do they use? What prefixes and suffixes? This whole lexicon is then conjoined with the ingested sum of all of their tweets and transcribed YouTube videos and Facebook posts, and then suddenly the State Department is a real-time heat map of everyone who is likely to be or hits a certain confidence level of being suspected to support ISIS.
Listen to that. The information is so thoroughly collected. Your Facebook posts, what you watch, what you put up, what you like. Even sometimes, like on our devices actually, they do record. So if it's Google, if it's iPhone, whatever, they record. iPhone is a bit more stringent. They don't really give that back end. At least that's my understanding at the moment. But they are able to collect all this information and form, how do I say, a psychological profile of who you are. And then they would try and find out, okay, now who can be nudged? Or who is capable of. And then they give you assistance without really straight on. to make sure you come to that particular point to give them what they want. So if you are somebody who's radicalized and you go and attack a place, then they can ramp up the laws now. No, they can say, oh, you see now the terrorism comes from Facebook, and they met on Facebook and they did this, that, and that. They met on TikTok, and then so we must ban TikTok, we must ban Facebook. Otherwise, Facebook, you must give us backend so as to check. So that's how it works.
That was 2014 to 2016. Set up by this guy Rick Stengel, who described himself as Obama's
he has the
propagandist
details.
in
Go
chief.
check who that
He's now on the advisory board of NewsGuard, one of the
is.
largest censorship mercenary firms in the world. But he described himself as a free speech maximalist because before he started this, he was the Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy. He started this censorship center. He was the former managing editor of Time magazine. And so he's talked about how he used to be a free speech maximalist back when he was in the media, and media companies benefited from that. But when Trump won the election in 2016, he became convinced that actually the First Amendment was a mistake. He actually openly advocated in the Washington Post in an op-ed that we effectively end the First Amendment, that we copycat Europe's laws. And then he wrote a whole book on it. This is the guy who started effectively.
You see, like locally, we have people going to court for Facebook posts. That should be against the law. You see, those are politicians trying to put pressure so that they are not criticized. Even whatever rubbish they are up to, you're not supposed to criticize them. And that's what that is. You've seen a few people here locally betrayed that. All those things are borrowed from this CIA USAID Manenos. That's why you're seeing like the guy, like all of a sudden we have so many like it's so rubbish. So like it's the most weird thing, especially when these AI images of the president in a coffin and what were coming around. His reaction actually showed me the kind of person he is, like really fragile. Ego is fragile as hell. And it's like it's one of the weirdest things that he's throwing a tantrum over that, really? Like you're at the top there, but that is what bothers you. Like that is so pathetic, man.
The country's first censorship center. But then they did a really cute trick. They went from counterterrorism to counterpopulism. Now, we've always had this ability since the 1940s to interfere in the domestic affairs of foreign governments or foreign countries.
Yeah, now you know.
To topple communist countries. This was the whole cold.
I believe that was they are using that as pretext. That we are fighting communism or whatever. Countries that are communist. So or maybe it was legit. Then it just spilled over to these other things.
Cold War counter-communism work of the CIA and the State Department, but that was primarily targeting left-wing communists or left-wing socialists or left-wing populist-run countries. When Trump won the election in 2016, this is one of the reasons I think Republicans were so slow to move on all this. They had never experienced the brunt of the intelligence state against the mainline GOP, or at least the in-power Trump faction of the GOP, in the way that Democrats did.
And it was really Republicans because the Democrats were in the game. They were down. Whatever was happening, they were signing off on it. So it's just, I found that so weird, man. Like these were the people always told. When you're growing up, you've been told Democrats, the good people fighting for the poor people. All that was just a game. It was just branding to PR to, but they were not at all. At all. But most of you are in that soup, so you can't get out. I've seen a lot of Kenyans in diaspora walk in a ball. They all get there, then they start pretending, the white supremacy, Rudy kwenu bas.
In the 1960s and 70s, when the CIA was actively interfering in Democrat Party politics to try to tilt them away from the anti-Vietnam movement and more into the sort of limousine liberal international interventionalist neoliberal camp. And so in 2016, the Global Engagement Center pivoted from being counterterrorism to counterpopulism, arguing that right-wing populist governments, it wasn't just right-wing, they were also against left-wing populists, but they simply never rose to power in the way that...
Yeah, because the leftist ideals are pathetic. They're some of the worst ideas. They're not practical. So these bleeding hearts people. They're not practical. They want free this, free that, free the other thing. They think the world is just like, oh, we need to stop and give. They don't realize that part of the human essence is being able to earn your keep. That's part of it. Let me just add some philosophy to earn your keep. That's part of the human essence that makes you really, like, if you really want to really enjoy your life, you must be able to go through that strive to build something. And that is what I think. Maybe it's just me, but it gives me so much satisfaction in that when I'm doing that. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the way to go. But that was just a little
Trump did in the U.S., Bolsonaro did in Brazil, Matteo Salvini did in Italy, Marine Le Pen almost did in France, Nigel Farage.
She should have won. She won that, but France is a very corrupt country. Hey, France is very corrupt. Wow. I've watched like their last 2-3 elections. And oh, by the way, you guys should go watch this lady called Candice Owens. She's doing an expose about the wife of Macron. There's some things there that you might interest you. Go and check.
Was on his way to in the UK and the Brexit referendum. The AfD party in Germany, the Vox party in Spain. In 2016, they were afraid that social media, rising all of these right-wing populist parties to power, would effectively collapse the entire rules-based international order unless there was international censorship. Because Brexit would give rise to Frexit if Marine Le Pen won, and she was massively overpowered on social media versus Macron. If, as I mentioned, Italy, Germany, there was going to be not just Brexit, there's going to be Frexit, Spexit, Italexit, Grexit, Gorexit. So the entire EU would come undone, which would mean all of them.
So you can see the big picture is that all these guys are just like, this EU manenos, you want to move out. We do our own things, because actually a lot of these organizations, we are told in our heads that they're good for us, but normally it's just to congregate people together so it's easier to manage, to manage them. Tell these rules for the entire Europe here. So, like, even if it doesn't suit you, you have to make adjustments to follow whatever they want. And even if it's totally going to destroy your country, you have to follow. So, Britain came out. People are saying it's going to collapse. How do you collapse when you've left a corrupt institution? You can deal with your own corruption.
NATO would come undone, which would mean there's no enforcement arm for the IMF or the World Bank or international creditors. Which would mean it would be like the ending scene of Fight Club, where the credit card company buildings all collapse just because you're allowed to shitpost on the internet. And they talked about that quite openly in 2017 as they were creating this whole censorship infrastructure.
So the 2016 elections.
You realize Joe just lets him talk and just ask a question, lets him go. I think that's why he's popular. He just lets people talk, so you get to hear more.
That was a counterpoint. That was like a turning point. That was a moment where they realized, like, this is actually dangerous. Like, allowing people to freely communicate online and say whatever they want completely undermines the propaganda that they have been distributing.
Exactly.
Completely undermines their...
If you don't understand the importance of being able to speak freely and express yourself freely, that's one of the main reasons. Because you are able to otherwise undermine any nonsense that comes your way, because you're able to communicate, get information, change your understanding of it depending on the information that comes. They don't want that process to go through that process. They don't want to go through that process so that you can meet your facts there at the end. No, they want to gerrymander the process, stop you where they are and give you their bullshit to follow.
Ability to control who's the president, what policies get pursued, things along those lines.
Yeah, it was the final straw, because the 2014 Crimea situation is the Pentagon was actively working with and funding these censorship operations through the entirety of Central and Eastern Europe, starting in 2014. And then Brexit was a major event in that. Basically, it was said to come to Western Europe at that point. But when Trump won, that was, I guess, both the final straw and then the massive anvil that collapsed any residual resistance that existed within the national security state that we didn't need to do this. And Russiagate really was the useful tool to drive that all through. The fact
that thing was
Trump
covered
came
too
into
much. You can
office,
go. There's a lot of videos on that.
under the barrel of a gun of a
Russia,
special prosecutor,
they
openly
interfered
alleging
in it.
that he may be a
was all bullshit.
Russian asset, effectively a Manchurian candidate of Russia, who only rose to power because of social media operations being run by Russia, allowed that national security predicate to carry forward this infrastructure and be massively funded by the Pentagon, the State Department, the IC, the NGO sphere, in order to set up this infrastructure. But then in July
Listen to
2019, Russiagate died on the vine immediately as soon as...
And you see, despite all this power, you can see that's how incompetent they really are. You know, with all this power, access, money, whatnot, they still make the most pedestrian errors, you know, when they are trying to be conniving and the evil ones. You can tell that they tried because they really didn't like what this orange man was going to do, and they tried to stop him. Impeachment, Russia, what? But it didn't work. And then when they are doing I guess they assume that once it goes like to their Congress or whatever, or Senate, that there were enough numbers who have been corrupted to actually allow for the person for Orange Man to be impeached or removed, because they wanted to remove him because they said there's Russia involved.
Bob Mueller completely goofed his 3-hour testimony, and
yeah, I watched
a lot of people were thinking before he took the stand that
the most idiotic
Trump was going to be in jail.
A lot of these people actually I found they're very stupid. These corrupt people, these Americans. These politicians of theirs and what, the CIA, the head of they're all just people. We know because we had this image earlier that these guys are high level, they can think. But once you look at the machinery and the people involved, you're like, It's just that now when you're against them, they get violent.
An asset
That's now their last. When you get the Parker an aircraft carrier by your beaches and start.
Kept under such close hold for 2.5 years.
Ask Saddam.
What was Bob Mueller doing? There was the SNL sort of fanfare around that. But then when it was revealed he had nothing, there was a moment in time between July 2019 and September 2019 when all of this could have been shut down.
But they
and we
couldn't
could have just
stop.
called all that censorship work counterintelligence, a national security state thing. But they did something really, really nasty at that point, which we now live in the permanent aftermath of, which is they switched from a sort of counterintelligence, national security threat from Russian interference predicate, which is useful because that gives you a blank check to use the Pentagon and the State Department and the IC on this, to a domestic democracy predicate. Now, this is really, really nasty because it basically transitions...
It's a threat to our democracy. Now you know where that threat from the democracy term. Every media house, threat to democracy. Every activist, threat to democracy. Every Democrat, threat to democracy. Some of those rhinos, they are called rhinos. These Republicans, threat to democracy. So like everybody now, they actually find it cringe when you find some guy you're arguing with on Facebook. It's a threat to democracy. Like, are you stupid or something? Then I realized,
censorship from being a strictly military thing.
Or ignorant. Ignorant is better because... But although some people, they even know the facts, they're just like, no, orange man bad. Doesn't matter how many facts slap them on the face. Nothing.
What we're doing to stop Russia, to being a total permeating apparatus over all civilian domestic affairs, regardless of whether there's a foreign threat. And when that was allowed to go unchallenged for effectively 3 years, up until Elon announced the acquisition of X, and that same month the Disinformation Governance Board spilled over, and then Republicans won the House in November 2022, which then allowed congressional hearings on all of this and the elevation.
It's weird to think like Republicans who've been told that all these horrible people actually are the people who are slowly bringing back the sanity, because see those ones even see when they got into this transgender manenos. For me, that was the last one. Like why are you trying to force me to say a man is a woman? Like, I just never got it. And there was such punitive measures taken if you didn't do that. You would lose your account. I lost like my ex account I lost it because of what arguing with those people on there. Then as when Elon came back that I got the account back. I had like 5,000 people at the time. Then I came back, it was like 2,000 something. But I suru.
The Twitter files and the public awareness from that. But for 3 years, you had this handoff from Russiagate. I call this the foreign to domestic switcheroo. And if you're interested, Jamie, if you look up, I'm not asking you to, but if you're curious, I have a whole supercut of what these people were saying from 2016 to 2018 while the Russiagate investigation was going on to 2019, 2020 after Russiagate. They do this foreign to domestic switcheroo. Those are the key terms if you're interested in that.
There's a compilation
Yeah,
video?
I did a compilation of all these DHS officials, State Department officials, Pentagon officials, completely changing their justification for why we need internet censorship before Russiagate and after Russiagate.
It's a moving target depending on what they want. It's, now it's censorship because of this, or censorship now because of this. So they don't call it censorship, or they say fact checking.
And they switched from saying Russian disinformation is the threat, so that's why the Pentagon's involved, that's why the state and CIA and FBI is involved, to saying, well, actually, domestic disinformation is a threat to democracy. So regardless of whether it's the Russians or not, we need to censor Americans to preserve democracy. And this happened in tandem.
Just listen to that. You need to censor the population so that you can save democracy. And actually I hear a lot of people try to use this argument, and I look at them and thinking, hako kwa kichwa ndani hakuna kitu.
What examples were they using to justify this?
It's an echo.
They pulled off a cute trick where they doctrinally redefined democracy to mean a consensus of institutions rather than individuals.
Yeah, that actually, let me just go a bit on that. You've noticed like a lot of news reports, they say experts say, or scientists say, or they don't really do much else, but the thing of the experts say, then your mind is like, oh, I'm listening to an expert, must be true. So most people, it's already hit them that, oh, experts have spoken about, now let me listen. And we always find it's mainstream. Oh, experts say this, experts say that. So that's what they use actually to now plant that lie deep within people's minds, so that it's actually difficult. Like sometimes I actually stopped arguing with people about some of these things because they're not going to change their minds. They've been totally fucked by this propaganda. They can't, the ego can't allow them to say, oh man, I was taken for a ride. It can't allow them. And I've found kwanza ukipata hawa Kenya wa diaspora wengi wako hivyo. Maigo kubwa, they can't realize they've been propagandized all the time they've been there. So whatever nonsense they're spewing, it's nonsense. So yeah.
They had, when Trump won in 2016 and Brexit passed in 2016, they took this anti-authoritarian toolkit, which has for 80 years been the CIA's predicate for overthrowing governments. I mean, really since the 1910s, when Woodrow Wilson announced that America's role is to make the world safe for democracy, we've long had a habit of intervening in foreign countries in order to liberate people from authoritarian control and bring them the gift of democracy. And that has always meant, primarily, that the government would represent the mass of the mass of individuals in the form of voting. When Trump won in 2016, at the same time that all these right-wing populist parties who were just like Trump also won between 2016 and 2018, primarily using free speech on social media and their popularity there, they argued that right-wing populism was the same authoritarian threat that left-wing socialism, left-wing communism was. And so they said, well, populism is the people's ground-up revolt against institutions, against government, science, media, against the NGOs, the experts, the academics. So what they did is they argued that democracy has to be defended from demagoguery. Democracy needs guardrails. We need bumper cars on democracy that go beyond what people vote for. because people voted for Hitler, people voted for Trump, and they were doing this at
Yeah,
U.S.
yeah.
government conferences, by the way, in 2017.
They use legitimate grievances and fears that people have to drive the point. So you also have to be careful of that, because they are legitimate. Even if you look at how wokeism and all this activism goes, these are legitimate gripes that people have with the way their life is, and government, how the government operates. But they use that now to install their their way on whatever population they've come to. So you say, oh, now the government does not feed the people, so we are going to go here and start planting stuff mdogo mdogo. So before you know it, all these people are totally dependent on whatever organization is there for their meals and their food. So the control continues like that.
Yeah, I can show you some funny ones if you're interested. But they were arguing that we need these institutional guardrails against people voting for the wrong person. And
so they're the ones who know who's good for you. So don't vote for the person you want. No, it's what they want.
Institutional guardrails are so-called democratic institutions, which is another cute rhetorical trick, because that's the CIA State Department watchword for asset. When USAID, for example, goes in and funds university centers, media outlets,
Listen.
Parliamentarian groups, activist groups,
Listen to that.
Legal scholars, you name it, in a region, they are building up their assets to exert soft power influence on that society, on that government.
Does that make sense to you now? Even if you look at our Gen Z protests, does that make sense? Because because a lot of these youths are okay, but we are leaderless, we are tribeless. But the truth of the matter is, they were not leaderless. They were leaders that are actually forming all this, coming up with the catchphrases, the printing, the what. They were there. And there was money that was coming from all these USAID and all these other NGOs to make that what happened. So unfortunately, most people just didn't see it that way. And they thought that this is our revolution. Every time I hear some idiot talk about revolution, I shake my head, because which revolution do you know that has not left the country that is revolting in utter chaos? Which one? Show me. Kwanza here in Africa, where? Isn't it just war? Whatever is called revolution just becomes war? Well, I guess recently West Africa has had some good things happen, but bado, it's not been long enough to know what these army guys want to do.
Government, in order to influence the passage of laws, the span of operations that they're doing that touch the U.S. Embassy in the region. And so what they argued is, actually, democracy is not about the will of individuals. It's about the consensus of institutions. So if there's institutional consensus building between...
Okay, just a second. I wanna go to the loo just a little bit. Hebu sikiza hiyo muziki kidogo alafu tukama.
With passion in the lens, my vision never tire. 20 years a journey through my soul and fire. Capturing the moments make the after real inspire. From film reels to diction, me never retire. With passion in my lens, my vision never tire. Follow me on social media, Alboa Cinema. Feed them movie reviews and entertainment flavor. We narrate the tales of hope and struggle seen. 20 years and counting, we keep them dreaming. I remember the first shoot on the African sun. The crew and the cast, we been as one. Just struggles and triumphs, never easy run. From dusk till dawn, the film work never done. Minimal Boa Cinema from the heart of Kenya. The 20 years we shoot films like our agenda. We tell the stories of the land and the people. Crafting movies, we make world true.
Okay, let's continue.
The military, the diplomatic sphere, the intelligence community, the NGOs, the media outlets, the universities. That's really democracy. Those are the institutional guardrails, the people who know best.
You've heard, they're everywhere. So if you're not really looking wide and checking out everywhere and every crevice, you would find you're being manipulated without knowing at all. Actually, personally, even when I was younger, kind of like when I towards my 30s, I kind of figured it out. I just didn't know the depths, like this, but I was nilikuwa rada. Angalia, say, unakama aje? I'd already dealt with enough activists. Take you guys going to Kibra or Madare to walk around with white people. They give you something so to show them the poverty they're coming to eradicate. They've never eradicated. Madare slums is still there. Kibra slums is still there, and all the other slums. Not one slum has ever been cleared. Not one. No, nothing. It's just continual. But guys have made billions, hundreds of billions of shillings. Man, you know what I'm saying?
That's a difficult process, by the way.
By the way, I'm not going to watch the 2 hours 43. I'm just...
It's a process that takes months, years. That's why there are these major consensus-building institutions like the Atlantic Council and the Council on Foreign Relations and Wilson Center and the Carnegie Endowment. We have a whole suite of consensus-building institutions to bring together the banks, the corporations, the government officials, the outside interests, so they all get on the same page about a certain...
That's why you see when they're pushing a certain ideology. You see, Pride Month. So in America, all the companies have the rainbow. So how does that work? It's because you've all been herded together. This is what we are pushing. So everybody, the message comes from the top or wherever it comes from, and it is disseminated through all this. You go to college, it's the same narrative. Media, same narrative. You go everywhere. Where there is money to be made, you find these narratives. Oh, we need this gender parity. We need that, blah, 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 blah. It's just that. Like, you're somebody like, why do we need gender parity? Why can't you just have freedom for people to do what they want? Then you see where everybody falls. You can have a few guardrails. You say, oh, you can't discriminate based on this, but you can't tell me not to discriminate against a stupid person or an incompetent person. I'm going to discriminate totally. If you're doing a job, you have a factory and whatnot, you would not just hire people to meet quotas. You need competence. That is your best bet. But they want you to have all these quotas and whatnot. All that is artificial. You can see it's artificial. It's been funded by these USAID people and everyone else is there for nefarious reasons. It's not even for your benefit.
Policy or initiative or regional drive or industrial change. If at the end of that process, a bunch of people vote for a politician because he does funny TikTok videos or he's got a popular dance and throws a monkey wrench in those years of consensus building, that they began to view as an attack on democracy. And so
that's why they all came after Trump. Everyone except maybe some right-wing outlets. Everyone else just orange man bad. Orange man bad.
They said democracy is really about institutions. And you can actually look up, for example, Reid Hoffman. In 2019, they were doing all of these conferences where they said elections are a threat to democracy. Elections corrupt democracy. Because we can't think of democracy as elections anymore. For example, Ukraine has banned elections. By the
way, for all those pro-Ukraine people, by the way, Zelensky did cancel elections. So right now, there is the so-called democracy in Ukraine.
We still say we are providing $300 billion of military support to...
$300 billion. Watu wanakula bwana history. No wonder there are so many idiots with a lot of money who think they own the world. Like, how does this guy make money? His head, when he speaks to you, like, hii akili yako haitoshi. Then you realize ni mtu corrupt too is being funded to hold a certain spot and push a certain narrative because they don't have to think about it. The script has been given to them, so it's regurgitated. If you go to all these women meetings they have, it's the same nonsense, just repeating. This one stands, this other stands, as a woman, and especially when somebody says, as a woman, yes, don't care.
Promote democracy in Ukraine, even though they don't.
As a human being, what are you saying? Is it logical? No, you're trying to say as a woman so that you can lean the facts, or so-called facts, towards you, so that your word can be accepted without question. Never happened to me. Ukisema as a woman, hapo sasa nimejua wewe ni imposter. Imposter.
Elections. Well, it's because of it's controlled by U.S. institutions. You can look up something called the Red Lines Memo By the way, on my X account, if you're curious.
So when you
Jamie,
say
show
that Ukraine no longer has democracy, essentially what happened is Zelensky was supposed to leave office and he did not. Is that what happened?
Yeah,
Well,
the money was
they've
coming.
indefinitely canceled elections.
Sure.
So he is
Because of the war.
Because of the war is their argument. Now,
Your president might pull a trick from such a setup. Guarada.
we had elections during the Civil War here in the U.S. This is this is not uncommon for countries to be at war and still have elections. The issue is Zelensky is unpopular and not winning in those
Very
election polls.
unpopular.
And we no longer define democracy as being
And most of you don't even know. You think, oh, Zelensky, if he had elections today, he'll be beaten like Amurukenge. 80-90% of the people will vote against it because he's destroyed the country just for those easy fundings are US. Because of the money that the US is sending, which, by the way, their kickback, it goes back, they send to Zelensky. Recently, Zelensky said that he has not received all the money that he used to receive. They say they've sent 50 billion. He gets 10, 20. I'm just pulling out. He gets less. Then the rest of the money, repatriation to the corruption in America.
about elections, because elections allow populists to circumvent the consensus of institutions.
Yes.
And if you want to see a great example of this, you can look at something called the Red Lines memo.
That's why I'm not big on people's papers. Yeah, okay, you have papers. What's in your head? People are buying papers these days, left, right, and center. And they're being fast-tracked, especially in all these institutions who just want money. Like, a lot of people have papers and they're so fucking stupid and ignorant. It's amazing. Amazing. Your president said he has a PhD. Your president has no PhD. That was bought. I've said it. We know it was bought. What time did he have to go to class to do a PhD? He's lying. Just like Sakaja and all these buffoons. And you give them votes anyway, don't you?
Which is, I think I have it near the top of my X account, or you can look for just the phrase Red Lines memo, and you will see Zelensky's first month in office, he was given a threat letter, effectively, by the U.S. State Department, where they had something like 70 U.S.-funded NGOs who wrote a letter to Zelensky ordering him not to cross the below-listed red lines, or else there will be political instability in your country. Now, political instability in the country caused by the U.S. State Department is the reason Zelensky ultimately became president. The 2014 coup in Ukraine was U.S. and U.K. orchestrated political instability to have a January 6th-style mob destabilize the government and literally run it out of the country.
Yeah, they ran off the president at the time it's just sheer force. Then Zelensky comes in.
They gave him red lines in every single aspect of what he could do as president. Security red lines, cultural red lines, energy policy red lines.
What were these red lines, like cultural red lines?
So, for example, that he could not allow the use of Russian language to be aired on any of the major Ukrainian media channels.
So it's like right now, the president says no Kikuyu on any media, no Luo, no Kisi, nothing. That's what happened here, like the level, because a lot of people don't know this. Do you know that? You know this? Like, you can't even speak your language. This is the good person. They're all pro-Ukraine. Do you know these pro-Ukrainians?
This was part of a drive by the U.S. State Department in tandem with the censorship work that started at that same time in order to prevent the sort of affinity, the sort of Russian affinity network that happens because of Russian propaganda spreading from Russian language news sources, and to try to pry the country off of the Russian ethnic faction and have essentially the Ukrainian dialect.
This is in response for what happened in Crimea?
Yes, and Crimea and the Donbass, the whole eastern side breakaway. But this is effectively the long arm of Langley, the long arm of the State Department and CIA, telling Ukrainians that they can't, what kind of language they can use in their own country.
And they've also sacrificed their young men to this garbage. Over 500,000, I think it's 700,000. Like, they don't even release the stats. They took a long time to release the stats. till they start grabbing people on the street to go fight by force. Old men, women. Hey.
Ukraine was effectively forced to transfer over its education ministry to an EU commissioning body, so that
Look at that.
Russian adjacent mythologies couldn't be taught in the country. They were
Even your mythology. So that means the next thing that comes is the history. You see, like in America, they've done a lot of that. Like they change history. They just force, like, no, it's like this. No, racist. They just shout at you. And they've constructed fake history to back up their grievances now. So you have to, like, even the books with, like, I was so shocked, like, when I was watching a lot of these exposés. I was so shocked, like there's very little that is actually real out here. Maybe our normal lives, maybe. But if you're looking politics, academia, media, there's just a farce. There's nothing. It's all lies, and everybody's just trying to manipulate us.
They were told what industries they needed to privatize and to block any attempt.
We did that
to
during
maintain
Moy era.
sovereign control of those
Liberalization.
energy assets. This is ultimately what gave rise to the Burisma scandal, by the way, and the Hunter Biden State Department affairs that ran through.
Then they blocked that story in
which is
2020.
a whole other fascinating
Because
topic,
it
I
was
should
them
add.
who
But
made it
the
happen.
I'd
fact
love
is,
to get back to that.
yeah,
Yeah.
but this is
All right. So that one has that is
Hi
the
there.
break there. Let's watch. He was also on this gentleman is called Benny Johnson. He has a very popular YouTube channel also. So let's hear a bit of what he's going to say. If it's similar, then we can wrap this thing up. Because anyway, there's something. Let me find out which is them. So there's this one I wanted to watch for Crowder, but I think it's similar. There's Team Pool. So these are the people I watch, generally speaking, to gauge where the politics of America is. So I wanted to actually now talk about what has happened to USAID and what the Orange Man and Elon Musk have done. Let's listen. This is Sky News Australia. They are more right wing. I found myself leaning that way because a lot of the woke leftist media is extremely corrupt. I mean, right wing is not. They are, but significantly less. Significantly lesser. Let's go. Shake up. So, plans to keep fewer than 300 staff at USAID. Can that music be copywritten? Says in your sheet up. Let's see.
2 weeks ago, there was a malaria team with world experts, and they are gone.
There's a malaria team that was earning $1 million a year. They're gone. You see, that's what they're saying. They're using people now to try and scare people, a scare tactic. Oh, the children. Oh, the HIV. Oh, the malaria. Oh, the droughts. Why have those things never, what do you call, where have they never really been solved despite all the money and so-called experts? Okay, I think this is what I'm going to watch because that noise, that music can have my stream struck.
Friends, USAID cut dramatically as officials address stunning and irresponsible changes. I love this story. Trump, of course, announced that they were going to be putting everybody on leave. And so we have this, there's a development. They said that senior staff...
By this Teamcast IRL, you can go subscribe there if you're really interested in politics. They're more very balanced in their takes. I've watched him for a number of years, 8 years, I think, since he was on the street and whatnot. So I have come to trust his takes. There's no one who's perfect, so I don't put those disclaimers. So he's a good
I've
source.
submitted a list to State Department leadership of around 600 people whose work around the world they deemed essential and could not be disrupted. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio approved less than 300 for exclusion, from a broad policy that will put a large percentage of the 13,000 plus workforce.
It's like a big company, man. It's like a huge company, yes. And these guys earn a lot of money. Because at the year you earn and you find out how much these people earn, you've seen the vehicles they've bought. Eh? I don't know. Let me find out. Let me find out. What was it? USAID vehicles. I saw there was a video they were showing just like new, like top range 4x4s. Here it is. Here it is. Look at this shit. Look at that. This is my 4x4. USAID over there. This is another one. The same, even the color. And this is like a 10 million shilling 4x4. Brand new. USAID. Unaona? This is like they've packed there. There's another one. USAID. They're here to solve poverty, by the way, and other things, problems, which need very expensive 4x4s. Comfortable. Look at all that. Look at all that. You see now, msee amepita mbali una rekodi nini hapo. Look at that. Look at that. This is what these people do here. This is what they living just nice. Sorry, nilikuwa nasikiza hapa. Where's Tim Pool's thing? Oh, here it is.
Administrative leave by Friday at midnight. That's according to multiple sources. Might as well shut it all down. 290 people won't be able to do anything.
That's
kind of the point. So let me throw it to Mike Cernovich. He can break down a bit, just a bit. You know, Mike Benz, he's the guy. He's been going off on USAID. And tomorrow morning on The Culture War, youtube.com/Timcast, subscribe if you haven't, we're going to be sitting down with a bunch of experts on how USAID is basically a weapon of the deep state to
I saw you had a good
soft
stream.
foods
You should go
and
check it
spread
out.
U.S. influence. Mike Cernovich says, this ish is crazy, man. USAID grants to far left-wing nonprofits.
NGOs.
The nonprofits pay their employees six-figure salaries.
That is in dollars, by the way, which is millions over here.
Most in the 300 to 500 year range.
$500,000 a year. That's like your guy who's earning like a 60 million. 60. 300,000 hour coco, that 540 million. That's a good gig, eh? To spread propaganda and lies across the world. Eh?
I'd estimate that over half of the DC economy is an outright looting of all of us via USAID grants.
It's amazing how huge this organization was. It's like how it's amazing.
You guys want to hear something crazy? Rumors are circulating in the DC area that top shelf booze sales have dropped dramatically. This is what people are claiming. So I like to go to some of these restaurants. Look, we're not that far away. We're probably like 10 minutes from Loudoun County, maybe 15 or 20 now. The old studio was literally across the street. Yeah. You go down to Reston or Arlington, and they've got these really nice restaurants. Everything's super clean and beautiful. These people, this is the capital in the Hunger Games.
You see the way our entrepreneurs eat well and lavish. That's what is being replicated there in Washington, D.C. So when you guys, that corruption is just as vile in America. Like, it's just that it was just a big pile, just a big pie that so many people could eat off. But if you don't add on, and you see all these people, once they get into that administrative state, because that is DC is the administrative state for the government. Everybody's rich, they're eating well. Joezi Madil, they are just being given money left, right, and center to corrupt the system.
It is. They're dressed weird. They have insane ideas. They're oblivious to the strife and the perils that working class people go through, and they get money likely through these systems. Now, I'm going to add one last thing to Mike Cernovich's point. I've worked for these nonprofits. It is not just that an executive.
I have done work for them. I've not worked for them, but I've been a contractor in my job, filmmaking. They want a documentary, they want an interview, they want to cover an event. I had to stop because I just couldn't.
Executive director.
And also they realized that I'm really not that guy. I am thoroughly anti. Like right now I am positively on the anti-activist side. Like I don't care about any activist, any activism you're doing. I find you as a parasite of society, and I don't want you around me, around anything I'm doing. I don't want. Just stay over there. Take Soros' money or Bill Gates' money or Ford Foundation. Just stay over there. Eat your crap over there. I don't want to deal with any activist. No, ever. In fact, hata sahi nimeblokiwa na Boniface Bwangi because he's a fragile little shit. Stealing money. Hiyo power to 54 yake anapewa 100-200 million shillings per year. None of those artists makes nothing. Yeah, ndiana. Na mtu hapa kuna watu live 1.6 Alex Jones.
Or senior staff get $300,000 a year. They work for multiple nonprofits at the same time.
Yep.
So when we look at these grants and we can see that, insert democracy organization of some type pays John Smith $500,000, it don't end there. That dude's also on the board of another nonprofit getting some kind of compensation for consulting.
We have that locally. So there are also these big wigs. Just see this. Mara is director here, Mara is what here, Mara is like there. But they are kind of the same organization doing similar things, getting funding from the same sources. So there are these people they trust. Huyu msee wetu corrupt vizuri aweze tugeuzia, tumemjenga, kuna nyumba Karen. You see.
Then he's a staff member or a consultant for another nonprofit. Me and my buddies did this 20-something years ago. We started looking at all the board members of various nonprofits working on liberal issues. And this is back during Obama. And we found that there were like 15 people that were on the board or staff of like 20 different nonprofits. And what they do then is some guy will come out and say, look, I work for a nonprofit and I only make $50,000 a year because I believe in the cause. He's telling you the truth, but omitting that he actually makes $3 million a year through all the other consulting and nonprofits he works for.
Exactly.
That's a microcosm of the absolute dishonesty that comes from them too. Just that example specifically is a microcosm of the type of lie by omission that everybody hates politicians for.
Exactly. But this is
yeah. So I think I'm gonna stop there because this thing really wild me up a bit, and I really needed to get it out there. For those few people or many people that really do not appreciate what this kind of organization do to us, do to the world generally, to reduce our efficacy in terms of trying to solve our own problems, corrupting our systems, corrupting our schools, corrupting kids, social media, censorship. Like, they are in every shit hole, literally. Every place that is bad, they're the ones who've created it or fomenting it. And I just think that this is a moment in time we've been given a chance to actually strike out and be independent while they have been handicapped back there. That we have to look closer where we are at home here and the people that we've decided to give responsibility to manage our affairs. And maybe ask yourself why we are giving these people the responsibility, why we are not taking the responsibility ourselves. I think it's crucial. For example, in my film industry, we have, at least on my side, we've taken the responsibility to move away from the corrupt people who have also been poisoned by these USAID monies and whatnot. They've done a lot of these activist projects. They don't care about profit, so they'll never really produce something that can be sold, that people will like so much and sell because they've already been given the grants. Right now, all the NGOs turned out, now we need filmmakers, real filmmakers, because they were producing crap for so long. Just shooting things badly, editing badly. We just need FGM video. Okay. It goes shot badly. Now they started doing, we need a short film. But then they got some stupid people to do the short films. They didn't hit. Now we need proper filmmakers to do it. So they've been scaling it up slowly because also it scales up the budgets. And I think we really need to be careful about going forward. Please confirm the information you get. Even a lot of the things you believe now, you need to question them. Don't be too married to ideas that you have not really interrogated properly to understand why you believe them. That is my point for today. I hope you enjoy your weekend. For those who will watch this or who've watched, I've not been able to check. I'm just one. I've still not worked that out. I hope you can share it with your people. You can leave comments, like, share, do all those things. I'm at 979 subscribers. I'm about to get to 1,000. Just like 20 or 22. So subscribe over there. Share to tell other people to come subscribe. Follow me also on X there, Alboa Cinema, TikTok, Nico Alboa Cinema, and whatnot. So I'm going to cut this up and I'll share the various clips through the week as we go. So if you don't want to watch the entire 1.5 hour plus stream, we love reels and other shorter videos, basically trying to get every section to see if it can be disseminated wider. Sawa. So sasa acha mimi nitoke hapa basi. Weekend njema and don't drink all your money. Okay?